Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'll be talking about the power of listening and relating it to the class of human communications. So first, I'm going to ask y'all a simple question. How many of y'all have been in a conversation where the other person isn't listening? In simple terms, listening isn't the same thing as isn't the same thing as hearing. Hearing is physical, so it's being able to hear the word, where listening is actively interpreting and understanding what is being spoken, and it is more intentional, and it's also more meaningful because you're actually understanding what is being said rather than it's simply just being heard by your ears. Today in this chapter takeaway, I'm going to break it down into three main points. The first point being the importance of the types of listening, and the second being the barriers that prevent effective listening, and the third being strategies to improve our own listening. In our textbook, the definition of listening is the active process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and responding to spoken or nonverbal messages. Listening has 4 stages. The 4 stages being receiving your information, interpreting the information, evaluating the information, and responding to the information. The importance of listening can be seen in our own research, as 45% of our own communication is listening. And another part that makes it important is simply it helps to improve our relationships, it helps to build trust, and it also reduces conflict. Now, there are 3 main types of listening. The first being informational listening. So, informational listening could be someone's talking to you and they're trying to teach you a certain subject, and they're explaining the certain subject to you, and it goes into your brain, and sometimes the brain tends to shut off and you don't actually interpret what is being said, and you actually just hear it rather than listening and interpreting it and receiving some sort of informational gain and knowledge from what is being said. Critical listening is simply evaluating the messages, so understanding the do and don'ts of what is being said, or understanding the outcome of what is being said, and simply figuring out why it is being said. That could also be evaluating a certain opinion, someone trying to persuade you, or whether that be a debate. In our own political debates, people that watch them are evaluating the messages and deciding on who to vote for based on their policies and what they are actually saying. And the last one being empathetic listening, which is understanding the emotions of and the tone of what is being spoken. So say you're comforting a friend after he has just lost a loved one, that would be more empathetic listening, as you are listening to their problems and you're listening to what is affecting them, and you're giving them an approach that is either going to help them or is going to hurt them. And an example of this type of listening would be, rather than saying to your friend, well, that's tough, oh, you failed this test, that's tough, it's actually saying, hey, you need to focus more, you need to start studying, you need to actually get your work done, you need to get back on track with your life, you need to, you just got to lock in simple terms. And I'm going to transition to our next part by saying this. Even though listening sounds simple, as I've talked about the 3 types of listening, there are barriers that can get in the way of our own listening. So the barriers that I previously talked about, there are 4 main ones. The first one being what we can depict as a physical barrier. Physical barrier could be outside noise. It could be how that person is projecting their voice. People tend to muffle their voice when they become nervous. And it can also be outside distractions, whether that be a phone going off or you receiving a text or just anything that deteriorates the relay of message from one person to another person. The psychological barrier can be broken down into stress, boredom, and also your own mind thinking of a response rather than actually interpreting what is being said. So in class, I know I do this. Teacher could be talking about a certain topic, and rather than hearing them and actually listening to them, instead you interpret it as a question and your mind wanders and you start thinking about how you can answer the question rather than what the teacher is actually talking about. Another barrier would be bias and prejudice. So that could be based off the person that is speaking to you. You could have opposite viewpoints on the situation and the topic as the person that is speaking, and that can simply just make you tune out what they are saying. And the last one being categorized as technology and an information overload. So with this, it's simply you thinking about multiple things throughout your day. So you're not listening to the things that you actually need to listen to because your mind is wandering and you're not actually understanding what is being said. You're just hearing it with your own ears. And then another thing would be what we know as pseudo-listening, which is simply pretending to listen and your mind is just daydreaming and going in 6 different directions rather than interpreting what is being said. An example of this would be in class, a student checking their phone for 1 second and them simply missing a key point, and that altering their success in the class. Key focus of this chapter is how we can actually improve our listening skills. So there are about 4 to 5 main ways that we can do this. The first way being be mindful and be present. So that is focusing on the speaker, maintaining eye contact with the speaker, and establishing that you're actually you're listening to the speaker and the speaker is your main priority in the case of gaining information from the speaker. Another thing would also be to minimize your distractions. So whether that be put your phone in your backpack in class, or just putting your phone on silent when you're listening to a speech and having your phone out of sight, out of mind. Another thing would be using active listening. So that is nodding to certain phrases that the speaker is saying, or agreeing or disagreeing to what the speaker is saying, and also just simply asking questions to the speaker about what the speaker is saying, so you are actively focused and actively listening to the speaker. Another thing would be managing your emotions, making sure you don't establish this bias that the speaker is wrong, I don't need to listen to him, and making sure that that doesn't block your understanding of what the speaker is saying. Another strategy could be just adapting to your own listening style. So everyone has their own listening style. Some people that might be note-taking, other people that might be creating that kind of photo of what they're saying in your mind and interpreting it through your mind rather than actually writing down what is being said. It really depends on the context. You have to adjust on the context, whether it is class discussion or personal talk. A personal talk, I feel like your mind can understand it more if you just let your mind think on its own, rather than in a class discussion. I feel like you should be taking notes because it helps you actually learn the concept and the materials that are being said to you. Lastly, another thing would be just practice empathetic listening, making sure you're understanding the perspective of the speaker and kind of giving them the same attention that you would want if you were speaking, and letting them speak before you decide to interrupt and agree or disagree to what they are speaking. In this chapter, we learned what listening is. We learned about the physical and the psychological and all these sorts of barriers that prevent us from listening. And the main takeaway that I would say I took from this chapter takeaway would be simply that listening is not a communication skill. It is a life skill. You have to know how to listen. You have to know how to interpret information in order for, I would say, most professions, at least 65% of professions in the world, use communication and use listening. And I would say that effective listening is going to help you build connection with who you're talking to and who is speaking to you, and it's also going to help you build trust with that person. So I'm going to leave y'all with this. Next time you're in a conversation, I simply ask of you just not to hear, but to actually listen and understand what is being said. Thank y'all.